1,009 per 100,000. That means that 1 out of every 100 people in the United States is sitting in prison or jail. Make any sense? And what are they there for? Well, this will show you. This is the accumulated arrests on our federal system from 1970 to today. In 1970, when we started the war on drugs, we had a little over 3,000 people in our federal prisons for nonviolent drug offenses. We had another 17,000 there basically for violent crimes, child molesting, that type of nasty thing. Over the 40 years of the war on drugs, we have increased the number of people in prison for violent crimes by about 300%. We've increased the number of people in prison for non-violent drug offenses by 2,558%. That's why our prisons are bursting at the seams. This is a nice chart here. This chart, the purple stuff over here on the right, or on the left, is the number of crimes reported in each country per 1,000 population, and everything on the right-hand side is the number of people in prison per 100,000 population, so you can get an idea of these different countries. You see Denmark's right on the top here. 93 crimes reported, only 67 people in prison per 100,000. United Kingdom, 88, 147 per 100,000. And look at the United States, 80 crimes and 1,009. What does this have to do? What does arresting people for this, for anything like this, and imprison them have to do with getting less crime? Apparently nothing. And you see all those countries that are marked with green? All of those have already done something to their laws to decriminalize or lessen the penalties. And all of those countries have a better situation than the other countries that haven't. I'm not even going to deal with the racism up there. Suffice it to say, to have more racist laws in the United States, you would literally have to go back to slavery. And anybody that wants to talk to me after this, I will explain that to them. But it is absolutely true, and it's one of the saddest things about my country. I'll just show you this. As far as racism goes, 1,009 people per 100,000 total population, but if you break that down by race and gender, we imprisoned 943 white men per 100,000. Before I tell you how many black men we imprisoned, let me suggest to you under the most racist law, how did I get like that? Under the most racist law in sorry, this is the one I wanted. The racist law from any country in modern history, that'd be the apartheid law in South Africa, they imprisoned black men at the rate of 851 per 100,000. In the United States, under the Prohibition government we have today, we imprison black men at the rate of 6,667 people per 100,000. And folks, they're only 13% of the problem. You can't get more racist than this. Okay, so what we're talking about is legalizing drugs and how it would help. How if we have the government produce these drugs, we can end drug prohibition. How we would distribute those drugs. Some of our people sell it, let's say sell it like we sell alcohol and tobacco and stuff and then tax the heck out of it. I like this idea better. I would give it away free to anyone who wants it, any adult who wants it, at a clinic type thing, like they do in Switzerland. Switzerland, 15 years ago, actually there's 4 countries now, and you're one of them that are working at this type of solution, but Switzerland started this 15 years ago. They said, we're tired of arresting our children for using heroin, and they set up clinics all around the country. where if you're a heroin user, you can actually go in up to 3 times a day and inject that drug. You can also inject substitute drugs, so methadone or buprenorphine, but I'm interested in the ones that inject heroin. 20-some% of those folks have quit using any drug. That's a tremendous turnaround. We're happy if we get 3 to 5% out of our rehabs. The reason they say that it's so high is they don't treat them as criminals. And when you're not a criminal, you can go out and get a job. You can get your life back. There hasn't been one overdose death there in 15 years. Think of all the lives that have saved. Because they're no longer sharing needles, AIDS and hepatitis have dropped. Switzerland, which used to be one of the highest countries in Europe for AIDS and hepatitis, to the lowest per capita rate of any country in Europe. Crime was cut by 60%. Crime was cut by 60%. The reason it was cut so much is because if you're a heroin user, you get the drugs supplied on a sliding scale. But if you don't have any money, you're free. Which means you don't have to go out and steal to pay for your drugs. And because the drugs are effectively free, there's no dopers on the street selling heroin, because you can't be free. Who would buy from you? So if the dopers aren't on the street selling it, that means they're not killing each other, cops or kids. And even more important than this, and this was discovered by a 10-year study the Lancet did on this thing in Switzerland, and that shows that in that 10-year period in Zurich, there has been an 82% decline in new heroin users, 82% less. So what the Swiss people have done is they found a way to reduce death, disease, crime, and addiction, and this is the closest thing to legalization we have in the world, okay? So the rest of this is all about what we would spend that money on, which I don't have time to go into with you, but I do want to get here to the point where if we listen to some of the smarter people in my country, or in any country, like Albert Einstein, who on Prohibition had this to say. He said, the prestige of the government has undoubtedly been lowered considerably by the Prohibition law, for nothing is more destructive of the respect for the government and the law of the land than passing laws which cannot be enforced. It's an open secret that this dangerous increase in crime in this country, meaning the U.S., is closely connected with this. Albert Einstein, 1921, talking about our prohibition? No, talking about the prohibition that my grandfathers and grandmothers had a good sense to do away with in 1933. And this is a picture of the people probably most responsible for ending that nasty law, taken 1 year before it fell. You see who it is? It's the Women's Organization for National Prohibition Reform. It was the women that ended that thing. Why would they do such a thing? Well, they write it right on their car, don't they? Save our children. Stamp out prohibition. Folks, that's all we're saying at LEAP. Save our children. Stamp out prohibition. Thank you.
Så holder vi en kvarters pause, og der er kaffeautomat og politisk træk udenfor.